I graduated in 2021 from a pretty small high school in northern Missouri. There were only 73 seniors in my class, so by the end of the year, everyone knew everyone, or at least recognized each other's faces. The last day wasn't emotional like you see in movies. Most of us were just relieved it was over. After graduation, everyone split into different groups. Some families went out for dinner, some people had parties planned, and a few of us decided we'd meet later that night at the old county boat ramp about 20 minutes outside town. It wasn't an official graduation party. It was just one of those places where people went when they wanted to drink without anyone bothering them. There were 6 of us. Me, my best friend Carter, his girlfriend Emma, a guy named Lucas, another girl named Brianna, and Tyler. Tyler wasn't exactly part of our friend group. He was one of those people everyone knew because he got along with everybody. If someone had asked me that night if I trusted Tyler, I would have said yes without thinking. We got there around 9:30. There were already a couple trucks parked near the water, but they belonged to fishermen packing up for the night. By 10, it was just us. We had a speaker playing country music, a cooler full of drinks, and someone had brought fireworks they bought across the state line. Nothing unusual happened for the first 2 hours. We laughed about teachers we'd never have to see again, made fun of our graduation speeches, talked about who was moving away. It honestly felt like the perfect ending to high school. Around midnight, Lucas realized he'd left his wallet at school. At first, we all laughed because nobody wanted to drive back. Then he remembered he'd hidden about $300 inside it because he planned on buying a truck the next morning. That changed everything. The school was only 15 minutes away. He asked if anyone wanted to ride with him. Tyler immediately volunteered. The rest of us stayed behind. They left in Tyler's pickup. I remember watching the taillights disappear down the gravel road. That was the last time I saw Lucas. At 12:40, Emma texted Tyler asking how long they'd be. No response. At 12:55, she tried calling. Straight to voicemail. We figured they were just messing around somewhere. Around 1:15, we started getting annoyed. The school wasn't that far away. Even if the doors were locked, they should have been back already. Carter finally said we should drive over there. We took my SUV. The school parking lot was empty. No pickup, no Lucas, no Tyler. We checked behind the football field, the student parking lot, even the baseball field. Nothing. That's when we noticed something strange. Lucas's wallet was sitting on the hood of my SUV, perfectly centered. Nobody had been near my vehicle since we left the boat ramp. Emma immediately started crying. She swore it wasn't there before we left. I believed her, because I would have noticed. The parking lot was completely empty. There was nowhere anyone could have hidden. We called Tyler again. Still nothing. Lucas. Nothing. Carter wanted to call 911 right then. I talked him out of it. I said they were probably screwing with us. I still feel guilty about that. We drove back to the boat ramp. Their truck wasn't there either. By 2 in the morning, we called the sheriff. The deputy who answered the phone sounded half asleep. He asked the usual questions: names, vehicle description, how long they'd been gone. He didn't seem concerned until Carter mentioned the wallet. There was a long pause. Then he asked us not to touch it. About 20 minutes later, 2 sheriff's deputies pulled into the parking lot. One of them photographed the wallet exactly where it sat before picking it up with gloves. The other deputy asked each of us the same questions separately. Had Lucas been drinking? Did Tyler seem upset? Were they arguing with anyone? Did either of them have enemies? Our answers were all basically the same. No. Lucas was one of the easiest people to get along with. Tyler wasn't much different. They had barely known each other before that night. It didn't make any sense. The deputies searched around the school for nearly an hour before telling us to go home. They said they'd contact us if they found anything. I don't think any of us slept. At around 8 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Carter. They found Tyler's truck. It had been abandoned on an old service road almost 12 miles from the school. The strange part, it wasn't hidden. It was parked perfectly between the faded white lines of an abandoned maintenance lot. The doors were unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition. Lucas's phone sat on the passenger seat. Tyler's phone was gone. There wasn't any blood, no broken glass, no signs of a struggle. It looked like someone had simply parked the truck and walked away. The sheriff questioned Tyler's parents that afternoon. According to them, Tyler had never come home. His mother kept insisting that he would never leave without calling. His father looked angry more than worried. At the time, I thought he was just handling things differently. Now, I'm not so sure. By Monday, the entire town knew. Graduation weekend had turned into a missing persons case. Search teams combed the woods surrounding the maintenance road. Volunteers searched the creek. Drones flew over nearby farmland. Nothing. The weird rumors started almost immediately. Someone claimed they'd seen Tyler arguing with Lucas at graduation. Another person swore they saw Lucas getting into a black SUV before midnight. Neither story was ever confirmed. The sheriff asked us to come back in for another interview. This time, they wanted details. Every conversation, every joke, every person who had been at the boat ramp. As I sat there trying to remember everything, one question caught me off guard. The detective slid a printed photo across the table. It had been taken during graduation. Most of us were standing together in our caps and gowns. He pointed to someone standing behind Tyler. "Do you know him?" I looked at the picture. No. He slid over another. Same guy, different picture. Then another. Same guy again. Every graduation photo they showed me, that man was somewhere in the background. Sometimes talking to students, sometimes carrying folding chairs, sometimes standing near parents. He looked to be in his late 30s, average height, brown baseball cap, gray polo shirt. Nothing memorable. If you passed him in a grocery store, you'd forget his face 10 seconds later. The detective told me something that made my stomach drop. We've shown these pictures to 23 people, and every single one says the same thing. I've never seen him before. I asked who he was. He simply shook his head. We're hoping you can tell us. I assumed he worked for the school. Maybe maintenance. Maybe photography. The detective had already checked. Nobody employed by the school recognized him. Neither did the district office. Not a single parent had identified him either. Yet there he was, in picture, after picture, after picture. Always close enough to hear conversations, never looking at the camera. Almost like he didn't know he was being photographed. The investigation shifted. The deputies stopped asking only about Tyler and Lucas. Now they wanted to know if any of us remembered talking to the man. Nobody did. Not one person. And somehow, that was the part that bothered me the most. Because looking at those pictures, he didn't look out of place at all. He looked like someone who belonged there. Exactly the kind of person your brain would never question. Then 4 days later, they released the security footage from the school. And that's when everything changed. The detectives searched the room more carefully. Behind one of the old cabinets, they found a cardboard storage box. Inside were dozens of graduation programs. Not just ours. Programs from schools all over the state. Some were nearly 10 years old, Each one had names circled in black ink. Most of the names had check marks beside them. A few were crossed out. Our graduation program was sitting on top of the pile. Every senior's name had been highlighted, except Lucas. His name wasn't highlighted. It had been carefully cut out with a razor blade. The detective didn't say anything for almost a minute. He just stared at it. Finally, he looked at us. This wasn't random. He closed the box. Someone came here looking for one specific person. The investigation lasted almost a year. The man from the security footage was never identified. No fingerprints, no DNA, no vehicle, nothing. Tyler's truck was processed dozens of times. They found only Tyler's fingerprints, and one partial print that wasn't good enough to match anyone. Eventually, the case went cold. Lucas was declared legally dead 5 years later. Tyler is still listed as a missing person. Last summer, I ran into the detective who handled the case. He had retired. We talked for a few minutes before I finally asked him if he ever believed Tyler had something to do with Lucas disappearing. He shook his head immediately. Then he told me something he'd never mentioned during the investigation. The prepaid phone that called Tyler was never activated inside the school. It only connected to the tower that served the school. The actual location was less than 50 yards from the boat ramp. Whoever made that call had been watching us the entire time. I asked him why they never released that information. He looked away for a second before answering. Because if we'd told the public, everyone would have realized there wasn't just one man. There were at least two. I haven't gone back to that boat ramp since graduation night. Not because I'm afraid of what happened to Lucas. Not because Tyler vanished. But because every time I think about that night, I remember something I didn't think mattered at the time. When Tyler volunteered to drive Lucas back to the school, he didn't even ask where Lucas had parked. I still think about her every time I drive past my old high school. People always ask if the story is true. I usually tell them the same thing. Believe whatever helps you sleep. This happened during my senior year, on the last day of school. Everyone was excited because summer had finally arrived. The graduation ceremony had just ended. Parents were taking pictures outside, teachers were saying goodbye, and buses were pulling away one after another. I stayed behind to help one of my teachers stack folding chairs in the gymnasium. It wasn't anything unusual. She had helped me a lot that year, so spending an extra 30 minutes cleaning up didn't seem like a big deal. By the time we finished, the school felt strangely empty. The hallways echoed with every footstep. Most of the classrooms were already locked. Even the parking lot looked deserted. As I walked outside toward the buses, I noticed only one remained. Its engine was idling quietly near the curb. Almost every seat inside was empty, except for one. A girl sat alone near the back. She looked about 14 or 15. She wasn't crying. She wasn't looking at her phone. She wasn't reading. She was simply staring out the window as if she had nowhere else to be. The bus driver noticed me looking. He shrugged. "Her parents are always late," he said casually. I nodded. It didn't seem strange. Some parents forget. Some get stuck at work. It happens. I sat on a nearby bench to wait for my mom. 30 minutes passed, then 45. Eventually, the last teacher locked the front entrance and drove away. The campus became completely silent. The only sounds were insects and the low rumble of the bus engine. The girl never moved, not once. She kept staring through the glass with the same blank expression. After about an hour, the driver finally sighed. "I'd better call home." He walked into the front office and used the school phone. I could see him through the window. He tried several times. Each call lasted only a few seconds before he hung up and tried again. When he came back outside, he looked annoyed. No answer. He climbed onto the bus. "Sweetheart," he asked gently, "can you tell me your address? I'll drive you home." She answered immediately. She spoke so quietly I almost didn't hear her. The driver nodded and pulled away. My mom still hadn't arrived, so he offered to drop me off on the way. I climbed aboard. The drive lasted about 15 minutes. Eventually, we turned onto an old residential street. Most of the houses looked normal, until we stopped. The address she gave us was a small white house at the end of the block, except it was obviously abandoned. The front windows were covered with weathered plywood. The mailbox hung crooked. Grass reached almost to my knees. Weeds covered the driveway. No car, no lights, nothing. The driver frowned. "You sure this is it?" The girl looked out the window. "Yes." She sounded completely certain. Before either of us could say anything else, an elderly man from the neighboring house walked over. He glanced at the bus, then at the girl, then back at us. "You looking for the Thompsons?" The driver nodded. "They moved?" The old man looked confused. "No. They're dead." Neither of us spoke. The man continued. "They passed away last year. House has been empty ever since." The bus suddenly felt much colder. The driver slowly turned toward the girl. She wasn't crying. She wasn't surprised. She simply kept looking out the window. "Is there somewhere else you can stay?" he asked. After several long seconds, she quietly gave another address. So we drove. This time the neighborhood was even older. The second house looked worse than the first. Broken windows, collapsed fence, a notice from the city nailed to the front door. Unsafe for occupancy. The driver didn't even bother getting out. He picked up his radio instead. "I'm calling the police." The girl didn't react. She sat perfectly still while we waited. Neither of us spoke another word. It took about 10 minutes for the first patrol car to arrive. 2 officers stepped onto the bus. One began speaking with the driver. The other crouched beside the girl's seat. He introduced himself softly, asked if she was hungry, asked if she was hurt, asked if there was another relative they could contact. She never answered. The officer turned around to ask the driver another question. It couldn't have been more than 5 seconds. When he looked back, the seat was empty. Everyone froze. The front door was still closed. None of us had heard it open. The emergency exit at the back hadn't moved either. The officers searched beneath every seat. Nothing. They checked outside immediately. The parking area was completely open. There was nowhere to hide. No fences, no trees, no buildings nearby. It was as if she had simply stopped existing. The police searched the neighborhood for hours. They brought in more officers before sunset. Dogs, flashlights, drones the following morning. Nothing. No footprints, no witnesses, no sign that she had ever left the bus. A few days later, investigators reviewed the security cameras inside the bus. The footage only made everything worse. The girl remained seated the entire time. The officer turned away. For just a moment, his body blocked the camera's view. When he stepped aside, the seat was empty. There wasn't a single frame showing her leave. No opened door, no broken window, nothing. The case should have ended there. Instead, it became even stranger. School records confirmed the girl had been enrolled that year. Teachers remembered her. Classmates recognized her picture. She had perfect attendance. She turned in homework. She ate lunch in the cafeteria. She blended into every crowd. Yet nobody could remember ever meeting her parents. No one had ever visited her house. No one had ever questioned why she was always the last student waiting after school. Police eventually obtained a warrant to search the school one final time. That's when they found it. Hidden above the auditorium stage was a narrow maintenance room almost no students knew existed. Inside, they discovered a small mattress made from old gym pads, blankets, stacks of canned food, school cafeteria utensils, bottled water, a flashlight, several library books, extra clothes folded neatly against the wall. There were notebooks filled with homework, calendars where she had crossed off every single day. She hadn't been sneaking into the school. She had been living there. For months, maybe longer. She showered in the locker rooms before anyone arrived. She washed her clothes using the theater's maintenance sink. She collected leftover food after lunch. Every afternoon, she quietly boarded the last bus, waited until everyone was gone, and returned to the school before anyone noticed. She had built an entire life inside a building filled with nearly 2,000 people, and no one realized she had nowhere else to go. The police never found her. No confirmed sightings. No fingerprints anywhere else. No activity on her records after that day. Nothing. Years later, the school renovated the auditorium. The maintenance room was demolished. Most students today don't even know it ever existed. But every once in a while, someone working late in the theater claims they hear footsteps overhead after everyone has gone home. Slow, careful, almost as if someone is still trying very hard not to be noticed.